We're going to move on to our next and last speaker of the day. And I think this is going to be something completely different for everyone. I just got back from a fantastic trip to Honduras, which was my first trip to Central America. The trip was with our own Rob Gilson's company, ecotourism company called Fauna Adventures. I was looking for a little adventure, and this hit all the marks for me: birding, butterflying, and photography. Our local guide and host was Robert Gallardo, who's going to be our next speaker. So a little bit about Robert. After 20 years of doing bird-related research in Honduras that culminated in a publication of a beautiful and comprehensive book called Guide, I don't know if you can see this, Guide to the Birds of Honduras. Beautiful book, Robert, absolutely gorgeous. Robert has returned to his childhood passion of butterflies. He and his lovely wife, Olivia, have been working in earnest on the next book, Guide to the Butterflies of Honduras, since 2016. Their work has led them to discover the first 3 country endemics, and they have added more than 300 country records to the country list, which now stands at 1,250. There may be more after our recent trip, I don't know. They're now getting ready to publish this book, which will feature all 6 families of butterflies using material only from Honduras. And next year in January, they will launch a butterfly conservation tour to finance the book's publication. Robert is truly a man of vision, committed to conservation and education of his fellow Hondurans, especially the youth of that area, regarding the amazing diversity of his adopted country. It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you my friend Robert Gallardo, who will talk to us about the butterflies of Honduras. Robert, welcome.
All right. Thank you, Allison. Pleasure here being invited to the Carolina Butterfly Society meeting. And like I said, I met Allison and Robert Gilson, who were just down here recently. So it's a great presentation by Tom, very informative, and great to see people up there carrying out these kind of initiatives with native plants, trying to bring back the butterflies. And we totally agree with what he does. And sometimes the more weeds you have, the more butterflies, because butterflies are all about plants, whether you're growing their native host plants for larvae and nectarine plants. So as Allison said, I'm originally from the US. This month marks my 29th year of being here in Honduras. And this is home away from home. So I'm not here just to show you a bunch of flashy butterflies, tropical butterflies, but also to show you some of our conservation initiatives we're doing here on our own with our foundation, environmental education initiatives as well, and also research in terms of finding and describing and publishing undescribed new species for science. And all this work is going toward the book we're doing. So let's get right into the presentation here.
There we go. Now we got it.
Okay, great. All right. So here we go. Let's see some nice butterflies here. So as many of you have probably started off loving nature, it was as a youngster. In the same case for us, I grew up in Southern California, and I'm of American Hispanic origin. Actually, we had parents that loved to go out camping, and we usually had a family camping trip each year to Yellowstone or Yosemite, Sequoia, those kind of places. And for some odd reason, my mom was kind of like butterflies, and it said, "Hey, why don't you make me a butterfly net?" So we had a homemade butterfly net, swinging the net around, catching butterflies, and making little collections in shoe boxes. So that's kind of where this passion for nature started. And one fond memory that really has stuck in my mind forever, as you can see, there's a bird picture there. And in my biology class in the 7th grade in Santa Paula, California, we were just entering into class. Everybody took a seat. Mr. Bryson was our teacher. And on the left left side of our classroom was all glass windows. Right outside the window was a big pine tree. And right before class was starting, on a very low branch, this bird pops in there, and just out of just pure instinct, I said, "Hey, a Western tanager." And so everybody looked out the window. The teacher looked out there, looked at whatever I was seeing, and looked at me and probably thought I was crazy. So I imagine I had one of those old golden books or golden guides to birds or something, and just knew what that bird was. So that's really how my passion for nature grew. So I grew up with this passion. Eventually went on to Humboldt State University in California and got a degree in natural resources planning and interpretation. At least at that time, that was one of the 2 universities in the United States that offered that degree. I originally thought I was going to work as a park guard in a national park or reserve or maybe a museum. And I did at some point work in a national park on a trail crew. I worked at the university's off-campus museum for 2 years, which was actually my internship. And so those are some great years at Humboldt State. And then right after Humboldt, it came into Peace Corps, and the first country offered it was Honduras. And I said, sure, why not? So I grew up with Mexican American food, so eating beans and tortillas, that kind of stuff was not too unfamiliar for me. And so Honduras, if you can see the map there in the upper left-hand corner, is really not that far from the United States. So it's located in northern Central America. And so during my Peace Corps service, one of my projects was starting the country's first butterfly rearing facility, together with a nonprofit organization here that had links with the San Diego Wild Animal Park and Zoo. And so once this project got up and running, they started selling butterfly pupa to the San Diego Wild Animal Park, where they had a butterfly exhibit. But right after Peace Corps, I returned to Honduras and thought I'd get my hand at trying to do a butterfly farm myself. It failed for numerous reasons. And then I decided, well, if I'm going to stay here in this country, I better find a line of work that's going to help put food on the table. There were not too many jobs down there for people like us running around looking at birds and butterflies. And so a friend of mine got me my first guiding gig as a bird watching guide for a group that was coming down to have an annual meeting. It's called the Rare Center for Tropical Conservation. At that time, Robert Ridgely was on the board, and I barely knew the birds at all. But I guess I knew more than everybody else around, and so he invited me to be their bird guide. And so that was really my first introduction to bird watching, or the bird watching industry per se. And I really was just naive and didn't even have a clue to say, people actually pay money to go see birds? Well, okay, I guess they better learn the birds. And so I dove headfirst into birds, and there was basically nobody in the country really looking at birds. There were some biologists doing some stuff here and there, but there was no bird watching industry whatsoever in the country. And there were no bird books, bird guides here either. We had a distributional survey done in 1968. And so I had to use the birds of Panama, birds of Mexico, and birds of North America to really start learning the birds. At one point, with the help of Robert Ridgely, he advised me to buy recording equipment. And so I had an old Sony tape recorder. I lugged around for 6 years, recording birds all over the country, and eventually produced a disc, The Bird Sounds of Honduras. And so that's how I really learned the bird sounds, and the birds themselves. And so that was about 2 decades of carrying out field work across the whole country. And at one point I met up with Olivia, which was 10 years ago, and she went on many of these field excursions with me. So finally, we're getting to the point where we really had enough information to do a book. eBird was just starting up, and I accumulated a fairly large set, a database in which to actually write a book. And I said, well, hey, let's do this thing. At a bird fair in Ohio, I met John Sill. He's the principal artist of the book. And we came to agreement to start working on this thing, eventually hired 2 other artists. And we took 3 years to do this book. I took a whole year off completely of guiding. Dr. will write the first manuscript. Olivia helped do the distribution maps in there. And we put this 500+ page book in, I think, in record time, in 3 years, totally self-published and self-financed. No publisher would touch Honduras, and in terms of publishing books, they just don't think there's a market for books, but that was not a deterrent for us to produce our first bird book. And so 3 years in the making, and that was the first book that Allison showed you. But it still really wasn't enough. We wanted to get this book into the native language. So when most people see these kind of natural history guides produced in countries that are published by publishers and by Princeton or whoever, they rarely come out in the language of the native country. And so, at least living down here, kind of see and feel this kind of impact that the people they're actually getting kind of ripped off in a certain way. So we produce these kind of books, but it comes out in English. And so most people can't read the actual content of the book. You can see the plates or the pictures or whatever, but the actual content of hundreds and hundreds of pages of text are just they're just unusable. And so I put together a team of about 20 volunteers, and we took 3 years to translate this book. When you translate from English to Spanish, it's much longer, and it came out to 600 pages. Very hefty book. And along with some donations, we were able to give away about 400 copies of books to about 10,000 school children in elementary rural schools throughout the country. And so it's had a huge impact. And so I could do a whole presentation on our bird work and the positive effects it's had here in the country. There are now 12 bird clubs, hundreds of bird watchers, et cetera, a bird watching industry, but that's a whole different story. So as Allison said, I'm going back to my childhood passion since the age of 11, and Olivia and I have been working on the next project, The Guide to the Butterflies of Honduras. So we know that in the world, there's maybe 25,000 species of butterflies. They're discovering new species. We know that the highest diversity are in the tropics. And so out of the tropics, Africa has the lowest diversity per given area, then Asia, and then you get to the New World tropics or the neotropics, which has the highest diversity per given area. And so there's around 7,500 species. That figure is climbing rapidly all the time. A lot of the work is being focused in South America now, especially Ecuador. A lot of people working there, Colombia and elsewhere, where there's literally thousands of species per country, thousands and thousands. So it's almost kind of a race against time to discover a species as deforestation trends continue. So back here to our neck of the woods, this is where we're located here in Honduras. So it's about the size of the state of Tennessee in the US, and it's 112,000 square kilometers, just a tad bit smaller than Nicaragua. So this is if you can see, this is a screenshot from Google, and you can see all these big green patches and then brown patches. These represent mountain ranges that run in east-west directions, diagonal directions, and then isolated massives. And then we have these big flat pine savannas in the east. So Honduras is very different geologically than Costa Rica and Panama, where you have a central mountain range that divides fairly cleanly the Pacific slope from the Caribbean slope. That's because in that part of Central America, those countries were formed by two plates, tectonic plates. Honduras and this part of Northern Central America was formed by three tectonic plates. And so there was crunching coming in from all different directions and with other fault lines as well. And so we have mountains that fall in every which direction. And in between the mountains, we have rain shadow valleys, some of which are as dry as deserts, especially this one along this north coast. And it actually looks like Arizona. You go in and there's big Oregon pipe cacti, barrel cacti, everything is spiny. All the plants are all xerophytic. And you would not think that that kind of habitat would be in a place like Central America. It's here. And then we also have huge quantities of pine and pine oak woodlands just about everywhere in the country. We have 7 species of pines. The biggest pine forest end pretty much here in Honduras and then barely spill into Nicaragua. And then in the far east, which also spills into Nicaragua, is what we call the Little Amazon of Central America. This is the biggest wilderness in Central America, bigger than the Mayan biosphere or the Darien Gap itself. This area is gigantic. So if you see on the right-hand side, these kind of brown areas, that's not from forest fires. Those are open pine grass savannas with Caribbean pine. Just that one habitat alone out there is 6,000 square kilometers. It is gigantic. There's a huge population of scarlet macaws out there that nest in Caribbean pine trees. They also nest in rainforest as well. So very different kind of topography here. And there in the south, just a little bit of coastline along the Pacific Ocean. So getting back to the butterflies. So we had to start our work based on something. Honduras is one of 4 countries in Northern Central America that gets very little press or very few natural history books are actually published. And then that includes insects as well. So we found a document that was published by the University of Florida. They had come down and did numerous trips. They were night collecting for moths and beetles, and they did butterfly work as well. And they were based most of the work on the north coast of Honduras. So they published this list, and the total was 861 species of butterflies for the country. Might seem like a lot, but it really isn't. And so we had something to go off of. And so Olivia and I started, although I've been looking at butterflies and documenting butterflies all my years while living in Honduras, even while in Peace Corps, we really didn't get serious into documenting butterflies on a nationwide level until about 2016. So that's when we moved into Emerald Valley, built a house, and actually had somewhere to store a butterfly collection. So we know that some people are opposed to collecting, but in a country where virtually nothing has been done, especially on a nationwide level, it was of utmost importance to have a collection in which to base our work, our future work, which is going to be the butterfly book. And so, as in many cases, and especially in countries like this, there's almost no support for any kind of this. And so most of our field excursions were on shoestring budgets. We stayed at houses of family members. Some places we camped and did field expeditions. And a lot of places we're able to reach just from here, from where we lived. But we haven't done all of this entirely by ourselves. You can see there's a picture of a few people, collaborators. There, for the most part, have been people who have been photographing butterflies just randomly in or around where they live. And in many cases, they have turned up butterflies that were new for Honduras. And some of them have taken butterfly pictures that are just professional photos. And some will appear in the future book. So here's a sample of just a few of the pictures that some of these people have taken, and some of these actually represent species that we have never even seen yet in the field. So great contribution by a bunch of these young people living in various parts of the country. So hopefully someday our goal is, under our foundation, is to open a Honduran chapter of a Lepidoptera society. So now we're looking at the same list here that's jumped from 861 to 1250 is what we're at today. Olivia and I have personally added over 300 species to the country list, and looking at books like Glassberg's Book of Mexico, the Butterflies of America website, and other sources, we think there's probably at least 1,600 species here in the country. So even Belize, which is just really close to us and much smaller than Honduras, they've already reached almost 1,200 species. And so we know our number is much higher than Belize. So doing all this work, got to come to some kind of conclusion or some kind of point where we needed to start to be organized. And so COVID hit. And here, at least in many parts of the world, actual restrictions on movement were really strict by military and police. And so this granted us the time to really work on the collection, to fine tune the collection, I'd get everything identified. And once that was done, to start a digital database. And so all this took at least 4 or 5 months. And we started working on this database, and if you can see there's a column says database. All the small numbers and letters are actual specimens, and that particular specimen has that code, a coded label inside its case. In this case, we're looking at hair streaks, and the ones that have a longer code on it are all photographs. So we have the entire country all divided into regions, and each region has 6 folders, 1 for each family. So it's a huge task putting together this database, which as of today stands at about 7,500 entries. And that's not too bad for about 5, almost 6 years of work. So in order to do the book, we have this database, and I did the same thing for the bird book. Took all my field notebooks, did a digital database, and was able to use that to actually write the book. So here's a sample where you can see this is a folder for butterfly pictures from other people. And so within this folder, there are 6 folders, 1 for each family. And this is the hair streak family. So you can see each one of these has its own database code. And so there's one here that's kind of highlighted with blue. Real rare hair streak in the country that we have only seen 1 time. And so this Felder's hair streak is photographed by somebody else. This is how it's going to appear in the book. Great photograph of a very rare species. Oops. I hit an escape button. Let's see if we can get back here. Everybody see it again?
Yes.
Okay, I hit the wrong button. Okay, next one. So just briefly here, we have the same amount of families as you have up in North America. The skippers, the brushfoots, the hair streaks, the swallowtails, the sulfurs, and the metal marks. Same 6 families that occur all throughout the neotropics, the New World. Skippers is one of those families that a lot of people avoid, those little brown jobbers, those little golden jobbers. There are an amazing amount of tiny look-alike skippers, and that are just confusing. And the taxonomy of these things just changes and continually changes, especially as more DNA work is coming. This blue one here is one of the easier ones to identify. So 473 species is what we have recorded for the country so far. This is where we've added the biggest percentage of new country records, because nobody pays attention to these things. We have to here. They come in all different kinds of shapes. Then you have the long tails and other genera that actually are tailed, all different kinds of colors. This is one that Allison and Gilson and other participants got to see during our recent butterfly festival. Very uncommon skipper, beautiful, beautiful little thing. If we see one a year, we're pretty lucky. Scarlet eyes, there's a whole huge group that covers many genera of these crepuscular butterflies, which I'll show you in a little bit later on, that are called scarlet eyes or ruby eyes. They're spectacular species. Gold-rayed skipperling. This is one of our signature butterflies for our property that's found during the rainy season. I could show you hundreds of butterflies for each family. I'm not going to do that here. It's just too many species. So brushfoots, we have almost 350 species recorded here in Honduras. And so this family, though, is highly variable. Includes everything from the glass wings, those clear, those transparent ones, the owl butterflies, the 88s, the dagger wings. They're in the lower center part of your screen are what they're called the crackers, the only group of butterflies in the world that can make an audible sound with their wings. The morphos, not all are blue. We have 6 species here. They're gold ones, white ones, and blue ones. And then the lower right part of the screen are the sisters or adelphas. There are more than 30 species here in the country of just those. Very fancy butterfly that's found here in our yard. Going back to what Tom had said about having all these weedy plants in here, the host plant for this butterfly is a tree, and it actually grows into a gigantic tree. And so we keep ours trimmed down to manageable size so the female can come in and lay eggs all the time, all year long, right off our front porch. And then the family or the subfamily of wood nymphs or satyrids is gigantic here, all different shapes, colors, and sizes. This is our only clear-winged satyr. This is one that we find on the eastern side of Lake Yahoa, where we live. And then different species of 88s and 89s all have the nice patterns on the underside. Then we go to the hair streaks. We have 184 species. This is a family we've done really well in. In the original list by Florida, there were only 80-something species. There were now over 180. And so we've been working with a lycinid expert who's based out of the Smithsonian, and he's been a huge help in helping us identify some of these species. Wing shapes aren't too variable. Unlike some of the other families, most of the hair streaks on top are metallic blues and some purples. We have a few species of blues here as well. The callus hair streak is kind of a rare one to find. Variegated hair streak. And the Ochus hair streak is one of our specialty ones from our property. So really, really great group of butterflies, many of which live in the canopy. And a bunch will come down to feed on certain kinds of wildflowers or to oviposit on small host plants. Metal marks, you have metal marks in North America. That's probably one of your smallest families, but in the neotropics is really where the speciation. Here in Honduras, we have 152 species recorded so far. This is one of our bigger ones, this blue sheen mark. A little more variation on the wing shape. Again, all different kinds of colors, different sizes. They're absolutely tiny, tiny metal marks. You have scintillants, some scintillants up in the States. We also have all these scintillants here. Many species that all look alike. All-time favorite, we actually got to see one of these during the festival that was on the ground, which is highly unusual for that species. This beautiful metal mark is found on our property almost all year round. Usually comes into our zinnias or mist flowers. Another one found here at the lake where we live. It's beautiful. It's a male periander. We get down to smaller families, the sulfurs, same as what you have in the States, and lots of yellows, orange, and white species. Except here, they start to get a little more fancier, I guess we could say. Like the one in the lower right-hand corner, the actual upper side looks like a zebra longwing. It's black and yellow striped, and the male is white with black, and kind of looks like the cabbage white you have. And the one in the lower left-hand corner actually starts getting into mimicry. So the mimicry complexes here of mimics and models, the poisonous and non-poisonous species really starts to take off. Then we have a nice group of highland species called the dart whites. Very unusual looking. And Central America has the only species of clear-winged sulfur. This is actual sulfur. And sometimes this butterfly will occur with the true clearwings, and all the clearwings are poisonous or distasteful because their larvae feed on nightshades. And so the adults retain some of those toxins within their body, and so they're distasteful to predators like birds. And so this sulfur will actually fly together with the true clearings. And so the mimicry does work. And sometimes even on places like Facebook, young naturalists will have this labeled as a clearwing, and it's not. So if you look at the legs, there are 6 legs touching the leaf. And so we know it's a sulfur. Brushwoods have 4 legs that are actually touching the leaves. A really nice one we have, to date only been recorded on our property, is this tiger white. It's a sulfur. It also mimics some of the orange, black, and yellow patterned clearwings. Very, very special butterfly. Allison got to see it the day after everybody else left. But that's the way butterflying and bird watching works. Sometimes just by chance. And so the last and smallest family are the swallowtails. And so here's a kite swallowtail, very similar to one you have up where you live. 37 species of swallowtails here. So they're a little more uniform. There's 2 groups that are really untailed, 3 groups, these cattle hearts and these other ones like this polydamas swallowtail. And then we have a bunch of ones that are tailed, like this giant swallowtail. Here's one similar to what you have up there, this is our dark kite swallowtail, male sipping on a wet sand. The turquoise swallowtail, this is one of the rarest ones here. This photo represents the only specimen that I've seen in 29 years. So very rare species. Typically found on the Pacific slope in Central America. And this one was at the edge of deep rainforest out east. And in the highlands, we have an absolutely spectacular swallowtail, a gigantic one, dark black with yellow bands on it, called the magnificent swallowtail. So back to where we were going with all this field work and the collecting, you can see there, have a few extensions put on the net. That was the day when we discovered the country's very first endemic or undescribed species. That was more than 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. This beautiful fire-tip skipper, this is now only the 4th species in that genus. So we've been collaborating with scientists from all over the world. There's a skipper expert in South America, rhyodinid expert, an American living in Colombia, other guy at Smithsonian. And we've had another person who works at a university and has access to this huge lab, and they've been able to do all the DNA and genitalia work for us. And this was the very first one. that was new for science. And thanks to another gentleman in the States, he was so kind to actually purchase the naming rights of this butterfly. So he named this species after his mother, Elizabeth. And back here, at least in our neck of the woods on our property, not long after we found the skipper, we found this MSS metal mark on one of our mist flowers, and I knew it looked different than all the rest of the MSS, these metal marks in that same genus. Sure enough, it was another new species for science, and DNA and genitalia work were done on that. They named this metal mark after my mother. So this is the publication here. These were published in Tropical Lepidoptera in June of this year. And so there's a third one. And this one, the DNA work has already been done. I found it in the actual village where Olivia is from. And this one, when it gets published, will be Olivia's skipper. And so what we were finding, these first 3 new species for science were found in 14 months. That is it. So that really goes to show us how little work has been done, at least in northern Central America. Obviously, there's been a lot of work done in countries like Costa Rica and Panama, and they've done decades and decades of field work and collecting and DNA work down there. But up in this part of Central America, there's not really much happening. So then we go on to yet a 4th species. A friend of ours named Roger was at a environmental education event with some schools. He stepped out for lunch into this pasture, and there was some weedy brush. Photographed this butterfly, which kind of looks like a California ringlet. We got it down to a hair streak. That was about it. And I think the genus, and sent the photo to our companion at Smithsonian. He said, "Robert, you have another new species for science." I called my friend the next day. We showed up there. We were able to get 2 specimens.
It's missing part of the wing there.
We were able to get 2 specimens, and that was it. We went around looking for the host plant. We could not find it. We could not find another site where this little hair streak, where else it might have occurred. And then another friend at another place, he actually found the host plant. It's a huge Solanaceae, a giant Solanaceae in English. I forgot. So giant Solanaceae inside the forest. This plant was probably about almost 20 feet tall, nightshade, sorry. And so we sat there for a long time looking at all the interactions of males that were hanging around the plant. Females would come in and oviposit. We were able to gather some larvae. You can see the picture there in the corner. And down in the lower right corner, the pupa itself is only 8 millimeters long, tiny little thing.
We
We're getting ready to start the work on this, to publish it, when COVID hit and Smithsonian was closed, and at least with the work with our companion, Smithsonian is really still closed. And so we cannot even get a sample up to the scientists up there so we could start doing the work on it and get it published. But this will be the first new butterfly for us that will have the whole life cycle described. So that's pretty exciting to actually find the host plant for these really rare and new butterflies, and to describe them. So how much do we really know? Even after 6 years of work, we're just barely skimming the surface on actually here in the country, and we're trying to relate it at least to a regional scope. This one butterfly you're looking at, called the Peter Scarlet Eye, we found here on our property while we were baiting with paper lures. So this was a skipper that was only known or endemic to the northeastern, western part of Costa Rica. Apparently, it's also been found in Belize. And then last year, on 2 different occasions, we turned up another one that was only endemic to Costa Rica, this beautiful little peacock skipper. We need somebody else, we need people to get down here so we can get a better picture. This is all we could get of this very timid little thing along the north coast. Both times we visited this one spot, we had seen one each morning. And so beautiful, beautiful little skipper, rainforest skipper. The Glamis skipper is another one. This is one that there were only a couple historical records for Panama. And then we have it here on our property. It's very common, fairly common during the mistflower blooming season. And this is one that doesn't reappear until you get way down into South America. And so DNA work was done on this because we were thinking this very well could be another new species, and it's not. This is one probably distributed in Central America, but there's just not enough people looking. We have another one here on our property. This beautiful Salvin satire. This is another one. There's one historical specimen from Panama, and then it reappears in South America again. And so this is one that uses a fine-leaved bamboo as a native host plant that grows up on the ridge behind us. So we know we're just barely skimming the surface on what's actually here in Honduras. And so this is where Allison visited, and Robert Gilson has been here twice. That is our house down at the bottom of the ravine. We've been living here for 6 years now. We've made 3 purchases and now own and protect 50 acres of rainforest. So if you look at that figure, 697 species, that's mind-blowing. And so that's almost as many species in all of the continental United States of America on just 50 acres. And the reason why this property has so many species, because this is a mid-elevation or a pre-montane rainforest. So if you can see behind it there, there's a big mountain that's actually a cloud forest, a national park. And then down below us, there's still tracts of lowland rainforest. So we're at this convergence zone of flora and fauna. And so we know that butterflies, the larvae depend on plants. So we know that the host plants or the plant diversity in this area has got to be extremely high if we're going to have almost 700 species of butterflies. And so this figure, this includes that one endemic, the metal mark, and almost 120 country records just from this property alone. So this is a very special place. That metal mark is actually in the hands of the IUCN committee to be placed somewhere on the red list sometime this year. And we hope to get our place nominated, or it's being nominated right now to have it classified as an international butterfly sanctuary. So there are many, many things we're working on here in terms of the in situ conservation. So this is what the property looked like where our house now sits. It used to be a corn and bean field. And really without planting trees, we just let everything come back naturally. All the rainforest all around on both sides of us is the seed source for this natural regeneration. And so that house sits where you just saw that previous picture. It was all grass, and then before it was beans and corn. And so this is all just natural regeneration. So more than 4 years ago, just by total chance, I looked out our back door and I saw this plant that had some blooms on it and was attracting a lot of butterflies. And I had no idea what it was, but I knew it was bringing in some spectacular butterflies, and put a bucket in the shade of a little tree and documented country record after country record on just that one plant. Since then, we have augmented the gardens. Our gardener had instructions not to cut anything that looked like that. And so there was a natural regeneration of the plant reseeding itself. Since then, we've had a gardener propagating the plants for us with rooting hormone. Now we have multiple mist flower gardens in and around our house. And the special thing about this mist flower is, and looking at all the other different kind of plants, native plants we have, and even non-natives like zinnias, this is the flower that will attract butterflies from all six families. So very much less so with swallowtails, but some will go to these flowers, but all 6 family of butterflies will visit them. Butterflies that typically inhabit the canopy, different long-winged species, for example, different hair streaks, different metal marks, they will come down to ground level to feed on the mist flower. And since we're adjacent to the rainforest, we have a huge number of species that typically dwell inside the rainforest interior, but venture out to feed on these flowers. And so this is just absolutely incredible plant. So you can see one of our mist flower gardens from one of our porches. That's almost all mist flowers and with some zinnias. So this past year, we're able to put cement pathways in between there for our butterfly festival. Before it used to be muddy paths, and so that prompted us to come up with the idea of having a butterfly festival. And so we know that the famous one in Texas has been going, I think, for 25 years now. And I think one of their signature plants is the mist flower as well. There's blooms, I think, around October. Ours blooms around December and January from a 4 to 6 week period. That's right at the very end of our rainy season here. And so we've been able to launch a yearly event. This year was our 3rd annual Emerald Valley Butterfly Festival. And that was the very first time where we've had international participants come. So it was wonderful to see people down here, and Allison and others, shooting butterflies, seeing clouds of butterflies come down into our gardens. But we also utilize this event to promote conservation, environmental education. We usually have a 1 or 2 drawing butterfly coloring contest with kids, and everybody wins prizes. You can also see in one of the pictures there, we put up a few of the cases on display for a short period of time so people can see the diversity of the butterflies here in Honduras. And we also have a butterfly photography contest for adults and for youth, and pretty much everybody wins some kind of prize. Quite often we have a camera, it's donated. And then art, we have an artist here in the country paint beautiful butterfly art. And so it's a great ceremony, and I think it helps inspire people, and especially the youth, to start taking an earnest interest in these things. So another phenomenon we have also found on our property, other than the mist flowers, are these crepuscular ruby eyes and scarlet eyes. So there are different ways to make a fermented baiting solution. And we spray this on a little piece of paper inside the rainforest that assimilates a bird dropping. So there are many species of skippers and other butterflies that fly around in the rainforest looking for bird droppings. And it's the males that are looking for them, and they're extracting certain minerals, certain nutrients out of these droppings. And so we have one part of the property, it's called Skipper Pass, appropriately named. It's at a junction, a divide between 2 high hills, and a trail onto another property, where we have documented the vast majority of scarlet and ruby eyes in Honduras right here on the property. Absolutely mind-blowing amount of species. And many of these are crepuscular. And so from 4:45 to about 5:45, we get this flurry of activity of all these spectacular crepuscular skippers that come out and land on these baits. And most of these are very tame. You can get really close to them and get some wonderful pictures. And so we hope someday with our foundation, we could start getting graduate students down here to do
They have written.
do work on different topics, and I think these crepuscular skippers would make a wonderful, great study. And so here's just part of the collection that we have. We have cabinets upstairs, so we are pretty sure we've amassed the most comprehensive collection in Honduras. And so all this work is finally boiling down to what our aim is to at least produce a first edition of a butterfly guide. And so here's an example of already cropped photos, and they've been enhanced as they will appear in the book. We'll have 15 photos per page, initials for who took the photo and the scientific name. And that's just a sample there. There'll be page numbers and everything else, but we're already in the stages of putting the actual first draft together of the book, so we can see how much it's going to cost to print. But this book will also have accompanying text as well. It's not just going to be a photographic guide. It's going to have a real condensed text as well. So our goal is to publish this thing by early 2023. This is more or less what the cover will look like. It will show the first four endemics or undescribed species. There is now a fifth that we found in somebody's collection. We're going to go in April to see if we can find this spectacular metal mark in the wild and photograph a living individual. And if we do so, that will also go on the cover. So I will most gladly share a couple links that we have if people want to help us with this project. There's a GoFundMe site that Robert Gilson started last year where donation can be sent for our book. And also the Missouri Conservation Heritage Foundation also has and receives donations on our behalf as an easy way to donate online. And one of the selections, there's Butterflies of Honduras. And so those are tax deductible donations. So we can share that with Allison afterwards, and if she wants to pass the links around, that's fine. And if you really want to help with what we're doing, we're putting also together this conservation tour that she mentioned. And so we've put together a team of 6 experts, and there's Robert Gilson himself. We've got a guy coming from Colombia, from Canada, the others from the States. So we have 6 team leaders that will be leading each group, and it's going to be like a fun competition to see which group sees the most amount of butterflies. It's almost like a bird blitz type thing, and all the proceeds will go toward publishing the book. There are going to be, I think, 4 or 5 companies offering this conservation tour. Robert Gilson's Fauna Adventures is one of them. There's going to be there's a company in Europe that will also be offering it. And so if you want to come down and see for yourself all these wonderful butterflies we see here on our property and other places around lake, there's that option as well. I'm going to show this video. This will be the last thing before we close.
The Pro Nature Honduras Foundation presents Butterflies of Honduras Conservation Tour. To raise funds to publish the guide to the butterflies of Honduras, we present this conservation tour initiative.
My name is Robert Gilson from North Carolina, United States. So I came to visit last January for my first trip down here and had an amazing time, saw an amazing amount of butterflies. And this year we've got our first group of international travelers, and it has just been an incredible trip. Everybody's been very happy. We've seen great numbers of things. We've had country records, property records for Emerald Valley. It's been a wonderful trip.
This is my first experience, and it is absolutely incredible. I've never seen such a display of butterflies falling out of the sky ever.
Since 2016, Robert Gallardo and Olivia Diaz have been working diligently, undertaking excursions and expeditions across the country to begin to understand the diversity that Honduras possesses.
So how often does one actually get a chance to have a bungalow skipper on one's finger? Probably not very often.
A publication in 2012 originally contained 861 species for the country, representing approximately 1/2 of the species that could occur there. Due mainly to the efforts of Robert and Olivia, the country list now stands at over 1,250, including 5 previously undescribed species. Robert has published 2 lengthy volumes on the birds of Honduras, which has had a tremendous, positive impact on society. To promote species conservation, environmental education and the sustainable use of natural resources, one must first understand the species composition of a country and then, secondly, disseminate the information discovered. He and Olivia want to continue this trend by producing the Butterfly Guide, a book that will help spread more easily the information related to the country's butterflies both nationally and internationally. Be sure to join us on this rewarding trip to the species-rich region of Lake Yohoa, where we will explore numerous sites, including Emerald Valley, which alone harbors nearly 700 species. For more information, contact Robert at rgallardo32@gmail.com or see the Foundation's website at www.prohn.org under News section.
All right, so that concludes the presentation. I don't know, you want to open it up for any questions or comments?
It was wonderful. It was beautiful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I had a question about your background sounds. It sounds like you had a frog in the background. Did I hear correctly?
On the video or
No, when you were giving the presentation.
I don't know. Sorry, I didn't notice. We live in the middle of the rainforest. It could be anything out there.
Oh, a gecko. Someone thinks it's a gecko.
We have a non-native gecko here.
Oh, non-native.
I think it's the Mediterranean gecko, I believe.
Oh, wow.
I had those at my old house. They used to squeak and bark. It was the weirdest thing.
Oh.
Yeah, the native geckos here don't make any sounds, just the non-native gecko.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a friend who may like to go and visit Honduras. Do you have tours? Do you do that type of thing?
Yeah, and in fact, in this April, we're offering a Hair Streak and Highland tour. So with Fun Adventures, we're going to this property nearby that has almost 80 species of hair streaks recorded on it. And then we go to the Highlands to see that endemic skipper, that first new skipper. For this year, that's it until next January when we do the conservation tour. And so Robert Gilson is already offering that one as well.
Okay, how do we find out information? Is there a website that we go to?
Yeah, Robert Gilson with Fun Adventures. He has all those trips on his website.
Okay, okay, good, thanks. Oh, I have another question. It might sound kind of crazy. I have a friend who has been actually to India, I believe. And one of the practices that they do out there is concerning attracting butterflies and the concept of sodium, which we all know about puddling. And this might sound crazy, but when an animal dies, do butterflies go to dead animals? I've heard that that butterfly people actually will put, I don't know, like a dead snake or possum or whatever out, and that butterflies will come to them.
Yeah, in some parts of the world, they'll use like rotting shrimp baits and stuff, and rotting fish baits that attract sometimes very, very rare species of butterflies.
Doc, Marty and I were out at a place in near Aikens called Gum Swamp Road.
Look at
And
him with his background.
pardon? There was a dead armadillo on the road and it had over 50 butterflies on it. Okay, so, and we have seen dead snakes and other animals with butterflies on them. It's normally a specific type of species, you know, that goes to the animals. But yeah, it's something that does happen in nature. Some of them go to scat also.
Yes.
We were on a country road and saw a bunch of red spotted purples and a few tiger swallowtails on a dead frog in the road. So yes, it does happen.
Interesting.
Robert, I just wanted to thank you for that beautiful presentation and all of the work that you're doing down there. That is just amazing. Thank you for protecting and sharing. Really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
And we may get to come down and see you sometime, Robert.
We'll be waiting for you.
I'm going to work on them, Robert. And also, I'd like to mention that one of the really wonderful things about this recent trip was seeing the active participation of all the youth there. I mean, Robert and Olivia are truly dedicated to spreading the word about conservation and the richness of the biodiversity there. And it's just heartwarming to see those kids in action, photographing the butterflies and taking a real interest in their native area.
Thank you. Oh, there's Matt. All right.
I wasn't going to say anything because I'm not part of this club, but I'm from New York. But yeah, the trip's amazing and everything. I mean, everything and more than just unbelievable. You know, if you have a chance, definitely go down and visit. Robert's amazing. Rob from Fauna Adventures is amazing. Everyone on the trip made it super fun. It's such a special experience.
Great.
Ditto to all of that.
Well, thank you again, everybody, for Chuck.
I have one last question. This might be politically not right. It has to do with butterfly nets. Does anybody use butterfly nets anymore? Do you guys use it in Costa Rica or Honduras? What is the state of using the butterfly nets in England and South Africa? What is the acceptable thing these days in the world regarding butterfly nets? If people capture butterflies, carefully take them out and release them, is that acceptable or politically or ecologically bad anymore?
Well, at least, you know, as I showed in the presentation, at least here where almost no work has really ever been done. And especially since we're working on a book, we're discovering new species for science. We have to make a collection. Magnets are not filled with thousands of butterflies. In fact, there are many, many common butterflies where we may have only one in the collection, and that's it. We don't have cases and cases filled with morphos or you know, all these flashy butterflies. But to actually do the book we have to have at least one specimen, even of a common butterfly, because our book is going to include wing measurements, width and forewing length. So we have to have at least one of each specimen in the collection. I mean, a collection well cared for can last, some collections are more than 200 years old. Our long-term goal with our foundation is to build a whole nature center, almost like an institute here on the property. We even have all the ground plans already done. And one of the first things we want to build, other than us building small cabins, is to get grants so we can build a natural history museum. This natural history museum would have 2 collection rooms. One's an herbarium and one would be for insects, not just for butterflies. So that's our first goal, is to build this natural history museum where the collections will be all run with dehumidifiers, almost hermetically sealed, et cetera. So we know that if we have collections here in the tropics, they will last a long, long time. So collections take a lot of time and a lot of care to make sure fungi don't get them, domestic beetles and other pests. So the collections are very, very, very important.
Do you use butterfly nets at any time in the process of anything? Tours, measuring butterflies, identifying butterflies? Do you guys use nets for anything?
Well, if you saw in the video, I did have a net in my hand during the butterfly festival. There were a couple occasions here or there where I caught a butterfly to show the people and then release them. I did keep, I think, 1 or 2 of 2 very extremely rare butterflies that we had never seen before. And so I did catch 2 specimens, but typically on a butterfly watching a photography tour, we don't even carry a net.
Yeah.
So everybody's got cameras and we're taking pictures. They're not collecting trips. They're butterfly photography, or butterfly watching trips.
Okay.
And Carolina Butterfly Society philosophy is for photography or an observation. We don't recommend taking nets on trips and things like that, Jacques.
Yeah.
So I don't know what other people do, but that's basically the way, Carolina Butterfly Society operates. Dennis Burnett, you want to say anything about that? Okay.
All right. Thank you again, Robert. Very much appreciate you coming to us today. And I sure am missing the tropics, shivering here in my kitchen.
We're working on a cabin right now. So the snow bunnies.
All right. Well, hopefully I'll see you in April.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All
Robert.
right.
Great presentation. Great presentation.
Thanks a lot.
Great presentation by all our presenters.
Yes, thank you all. Wonderful. Yep, bravo, bravo.